Module 17, pronoun case. First, let's define pronoun case. Personal pronouns have a different case depending on how they are used in a sentence. That is, whether the pronoun is being used as a subject, or an object, or as a possessive pronoun. The following chart shows the different forms of personal pronouns. Now let's just look at, for example, first person singular. If we're looking at a first person singular pronoun in the subject, as a subject in the sentence, we would use the pronoun I. First person singular as an object in the sentence, we would use me. And first person singular used as a possessive pronoun, it would be either my or mine. All right, let's look at some examples. There are 4 rules to follow when it comes to pronoun case. Rule number 1. The form of the pronoun depends upon whether the pronoun is the subject or object in a sentence. Examples. Example number 1. Fred and I, or Fred and me, are going to the movies. Here, let's determine, first of all, the subject and verb in this sentence. Are going is the main verb, and Fred and I, or Fred and me, is the subject in this sentence. So now we have to go back to our chart to see where, what form of the pronoun we use for the first person singular in the subject, as a subject in the sentence. So first person singular, as a subject, we would use I. So in this case, Fred and I are going to the movies. It wouldn't be me because the pronoun in this case is the subject of the sentence. Let's look at the second example. Brenda visited my mother and she, or Brenda visited my mother and her yesterday. Again, let's find the subject and verb of the sentence. Visited is the verb, and the subject is Brenda. My mother and she, or my mother and her, these are the objects in this sentence. They answer the question, whom or what after the verb. So, object. We're looking at third person singular here, she or her. So let's determine which one is correct by going back to the chart. Okay, so third person singular. In the object position, we're looking at her. So Brenda visited my mother and her yesterday. She would be wrong because we would use she in the subject position of the sentence, but here it should be the object. So it is her. We use the personal pronoun her in the object position for third person singular. Okay, now that is the correct way of doing things and a little bit complicated. An easier way, but not as reliable, is by using your ear. And here's a good tip. This is sort of a shortcut, but again, it might not be totally reliable because you can't always rely on your ear when it comes to pronoun use, pronoun case use, but let's try. Tip: make the subject or the object in the sentence singular. For example, in the third example, omit Sam. So it would be George sent letters to me. Here's what I mean. Let's look at this third example. George sent letters to Sam and I, or George sent letters to Sam and me. Let's get rid of Sam and. Make the object in this case singular. So would you say, just by ear, George sent letters to me, or George sent letters to I? Just by ear, it sounds correct to say George sent letters to me. So that is correct. Okay? But again, it's not the most, using your ear is not the most reliable because sometimes pronoun case can fool us. Let's look at the second rule. Rule number 2. In comparisons, either the subjective or the objective form of the pronoun may be required. Okay? The best way to figure out how to do it is be sure to finish the comparison by repeating the main verb. That's the best way of figuring out which form of the pronoun to use. For example, example number 1. Does John work harder than I, or does John work harder than me? A lot of us would say, does John work harder than me, if we were trusting our ear. But it's actually I, because if you finish the sentence, the statement, with the verb of the sentence, you'll see how clear it becomes that it is I. Does John work harder than I work? Okay, if you finish the sentence, the statement off with the verb, you see that it's very clearly, you wouldn't say, does John work harder than me work? You would ask, does John work harder than I work? Let's look at number 2. Let's finish the comparison with the verb. That hat suits me better than she, or that hat suits me better than her. Okay, in this case, we would finish it off with, that hat suits me better than it suits her. Okay, we wouldn't say, that hat suits me better than it suits she. Okay, so finish off the comparison with including the verb. Let's look at the third example. George cannot run as fast as we, or George cannot run as fast as us. To finish off the comparison with the verb, George cannot run as fast as we run. Okay, so you see how clear it becomes when, and easy it is to figure out with your ear when you finish off the comparison with the verb. Let's look at rule number 3. Only subjective forms of pronouns, I, he, she, we, follow the verb to be. Okay, not the objective forms, me, him, or us. So only the subjective forms follow the forms of to be. So it is I or it is me who will get into trouble, not he. Okay? The form of to be here is. So the rule is the subjective form of the pronoun must follow the form of to be. So the answer here is I. It is I who will get into trouble, not he. Second one, it is we or it is us who have helped him the most. Again, we have a form of to be, so the rule is, as the main verb, so the rule is, after a form of to be, we must use the subjective form of the pronoun, which is we. Us is the objective form. Me is the objective form. So it is we who have helped him the most. Rule number 4, and this is probably the most complex rule, and it's the difference between who and whom. Okay, when you are deciding whether to use who or whom, remember that who is the subjective form of the pronoun and whom is the objective form of the pronoun. Okay, so you have to determine if who is referring to the subject or the object. Who or whom is coming to the party? Here's how we figure it out. Here's our tip. Try answering the question. For example, Tom is coming to the party. Tom is the subject of the sentence. So the who is referring to the subject. Therefore, the who or whom is referring to the subject. Therefore, the subjective form must be used, who. Again, answer the question, Tom is coming to the party. Tom is the subject of the sentence. So the who or whom in this case is referring to the subject. The subject form is who. Whom is the object form. Who is coming to the party is correct. Another example, example 4b. Who or whom do you wish to see? Again, the tip is try answering the question. For example, I wish to see Megan. Okay, Megan in this case is the object of the sentence, not the subject. The subject is I. I wish to see whom? Megan. So therefore, since we're referring to the object in the sentence, whom is correct. Whom do you wish to see? I wish to see Megan. Who would be the form used for if we were referring to the subject, but we're referring to the object, so it's whom. Example 4C. The girl who or the girl whom is doing most of the work is my sister. Rephrase the sentence using all of the words after who or whom. For example, my sister is doing most of the work. Okay, so instead of the girl who or the girl whom is doing most of the work is my sister, rephrase it, my sister is doing most of the work. We see that sister is the subject of the sentence. And who or whom is referring to the subject, therefore we use who. The girl who is doing most of the homework is my sister. Sister is the subject of this sentence when we rephrase it. And finally, example 4D, he is the boy who or whom hit me. Again, the tip is to rephrase the sentence using all of the words after who or whom. For example, he hit me. Okay? So he in this sentence is the subject. Okay? Who or whom is referring to he, which is the subject of the sentence, so who is the proper form of the pronoun. Whom would be used if we were referring to the object of the sentence, but we're referring to the subject. He hit me. So therefore it is he is the boy who hit me.